Racist cop accidentally pulls over. Black police captain, what happens next is shocking. The road was quiet and it was supposed to be just another drive home. A father and son drove home, the faint laughter from their conversation filling the car. But then, out of nowhere, the flashing red and blue lights broke through the peace, slicing the darkness like a warning. The father's calm words, "Stay calm, son," were meant to reassure, but they carried an undertone of something more. Something Jordan, the son, couldn't yet name but could feel. The officer approaching the car was just doing his job, or so it seemed. But as he drew closer, what began as a routine stop would transform into something far more unsettling. Prejudice, authority, and justice were about to collide in ways no one could predict. This is the story of a racist cop who made the mistake of pulling over the wrong man, a black police captain. And what happened next is nothing short of shocking. You'll want to hold on to every word as the tension builds and the truth comes crashing down. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over a winding suburban road. The gentle hum of cicadas filled the air, mingling with the faint rustle of leaves in the breeze. A sleek black sedan cruised down the lane, its headlights cutting through the soft twilight. Inside, the atmosphere was warm and lively. Jordan, a sharp and inquisitive 15-year-old, sat in the passenger seat, scrolling through his phone. His father, Captain Marcus Reed, a poised and respected figure in the community, had one hand on the steering wheel and the other resting casually on the armrest. The conversation between them ebbed and flowed with ease. "So, you think you'll make the varsity team this year?" Marcus asked, throwing a playful glance at his son. Jordan grinned. "You mean when I make the team, right?" Marcus chuckled. "That's the spirit. Confidence wins half the battle." The road stretched ahead, empty and serene, until a faint glow appeared in the rearview mirror. Marcus glanced at it instinctively. The glow intensified, transforming into the unmistakable red and blue lights of a patrol car. Jordan noticed it too, his expression shifting from playful to curious. "Dad, is he pulling us over?" Marcus's brow furrowed slightly as he checked the speedometer. He wasn't speeding, and everything about the car was in order. Still, he slowed down and signaled, pulling to the side of the road. "It's nothing, son," Marcus said calmly, though his voice carried a weight Jordan couldn't quite place. "Just a routine stop. Keep your hands visible and stay quiet." Jordan nodded, his curiosity now mixed with a hint of unease. He had never seen his father this measured, this deliberate. As they came to a stop, the patrol car parked behind them, its lights still flashing. In the side mirror, Marcus saw the officer emerge, silhouetted against the glow. The officer's stride was deliberate, his posture rigid. Marcus adjusted his tie slightly, his badge glinting faintly under the dim interior light. His voice was steady but firm. "Remember, Jordan, always stay respectful, no matter what happens." Jordan's voice was barely above a whisper. "You think something's wrong?" Marcus glanced at his son, his calm demeanor betraying a flicker of something deeper, something Jordan had never seen before. "No, son," Marcus said, his tone resolute. "But we'll find out soon enough." The officer approached the driver's side window, flashlight in hand, the beam cutting sharply through the dim cabin. Marcus rolled down the window, his expression neutral, waiting for what was to come. And in that moment, the quiet road became the stage for an encounter that would change everything. The beam of the flashlight sliced through the interior of the car, its cold glare bouncing off the polished dashboard. Marcus kept his hands on the steering wheel, fingers steady, while Jordan instinctively straightened in his seat, his body tense. The officer, tall with a rigid demeanor, came into full view. His uniform was immaculate, but his eyes carried an edge, a scrutinizing sharpness that didn't belong to someone merely doing their job. His badge glinted under the flickering red and blue lights, but his face was set in a hard, almost challenging expression. "License and registration," the officer barked, his tone devoid of the usual courtesy. Marcus nodded, moving slowly, deliberately. "Of course, officer." His voice was calm, almost disarmingly so, but the officer didn't seem to notice. Jordan, watching from the corner of his eye, felt the air in the car grow heavier. The officer's gaze darted between Marcus and him, lingering on Jordan for a moment too long. "What's your hurry tonight?" the cop asked, his flashlight hovering over Marcus's face. "No hurry at all," Marcus replied evenly, handing over his license and registration. The officer studied the documents briefly, then glanced back at Marcus with a smirk that didn't reach his eyes. "You always drive a car like this around here?" Jordan shifted uncomfortably in his seat, the words hanging in the air like a challenge. Marcus remained composed. "I believe it's a free country, officer," Marcus said, his tone firm but polite. "Is there a problem with my car?" The cop's smirk faltered slightly, replaced by a glimmer of irritation. "Watch your tone. You're in no position to ask questions." Jordan's fists clenched in his lap, his heart pounding. He looked at his father, who remained unshaken, his calm demeanor unwavering. The officer leaned closer, his flashlight now pointed at Jordan. "You got ID, kid?" Marcus's voice cut through the tension like a knife. "My son isn't required to show ID, officer. He's a passenger, not the driver." The officer straightened, clearly not expecting the challenge. His jaw tightened, and for a brief moment, the air crackled with unspoken tension. "You're awfully confident for someone I just pulled over," the officer said, narrowing his eyes. Marcus met his gaze without flinching. "I'm confident because I've done nothing wrong. Now, if you could tell me why you pulled us over, we'd be happy to cooperate." The officer didn't respond immediately, instead taking a step back and staring at the license in his hand. Something flickered across his face, a mixture of realization and unease, as he read the name. "Captain Reed," he muttered under his breath, almost too low to hear. But Marcus heard it, and so did Jordan. The officer's demeanor shifted, but only slightly. He hesitated, then turned back to Marcus, his posture stiff. "Stay here," he muttered, retreating toward his patrol car with the documents in hand. As the officer walked away, Jordan exhaled sharply, the tension in his chest finally releasing. "Dad," he whispered, "he's acting weird. What's his deal?" Marcus glanced at his son, his expression unreadable. "Just stay calm. Let's see where this goes." But deep down, Marcus knew exactly where this was going, and it was far from over. As the silence enveloped them, Marcus released a slow, steady breath, his grip on the steering wheel finally loosening. He turned slightly, casting a protective glance at Jordan, who sat frozen, his wide eyes filled with confusion and unease. "Are you okay, son?" Marcus asked softly, his voice a calming anchor in the aftermath of tension. Jordan nodded, but his trembling hands betrayed him. I think so," he whispered. As the patrol car sped away, its taillights fading into the distance, Jordan released a shaky breath. His hands trembled slightly as he turned to his father. "Dad, what just happened?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Why was he so angry?" Marcus exhaled deeply, his hands finally dropping from the steering wheel. He glanced at his son, his expression softening. "That wasn't anger, Jordan," Marcus said quietly. "That was fear. Fear of being exposed, fear of losing control." Jordan frowned, confusion and unease swirling in his mind. "But you didn't do anything wrong." "Why would he act like that?" Marcus leaned back in his seat, his eyes fixed on the empty road ahead. "Sometimes, son, people like him see authority as a weapon, not a responsibility. When they come across someone who challenges that, they don't know how to handle it. Jordan's voice wavered. Were you scared? Marcus turned to his son, his gaze steady. Number. But I know how moments like that can end, and it's not always this peacefully. That's why I stayed calm. For both of us. Jordan nodded slowly, the gravity of his father's words sinking in. He felt a mixture of fear and admiration, his perception of the world shifting in ways he wasn't sure he could fully process yet. The car was silent as they resumed their drive home, but Jordan's thoughts raced. He couldn't shake the look on the officer's face, the way his father had handled the situation with unflinching calm. Finally, he spoke. Dad, why didn't you just let it go? Marcus glanced at him, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. Because letting it go doesn't teach anything, Jordan. It doesn't change anything. Jordan furrowed his brow. But you can't change how people like him think, can you? Marcus's smile faded, replaced by a thoughtful expression. Maybe not at the moment. But every time we stand up to injustice, even in small ways, we plant a seed. It's not about changing one person. It's about changing the system they're part of. Jordan's eyes widened as the weight of his father's words settled over him. The next morning, as sunlight streamed through the kitchen window, there was a knock at the door. Marcus opened it to find the officer from the previous night standing on the porch. His uniform seemed to weigh heavier on him than before, and his face was a mix of hesitation and guilt. Captain Reed, the officer began, his voice faltering slightly. I wanted to apologize for last night. Marcus stood silent for a moment, his expression unreadable, before stepping aside to let the officer in. The kitchen felt too quiet as they sat at the table, the officer nervously wringing his hands. I've been thinking about it all night, the officer confessed, his words halting. The way I acted, it wasn't just unprofessional. It was wrong. I judged you before I even knew who you were. And that's on me. Marcus leaned forward slightly, his gaze steady but calm. Why do you think you did that? The question caught the officer off guard. He glanced down at his hands, taking a moment before replying. I think it's how I was trained, or maybe how I've let myself think over time. I don't know, but I realized last night I wasn't doing my job the way I should, and I put you and your son in a position you didn't deserve. Marcus nodded slowly. Acknowledging it is a start, but it's not enough. Change takes more than regret. It takes action. Are you ready to confront what made you act that way? The officer's jaw tightened as he met Marcus's gaze. I want to be better, he said earnestly. I know it's not enough to just say it. I need to prove it to myself and to others. Marcus studied him for a long moment before extending a hand. Then start by holding yourself accountable. And remember, every action moving forward is an opportunity to do better. The officer shook his hand firmly, gratitude evident in his eyes. Thank you, Captain. I'll make this right. After the officer left, Jordan turned to his father, his expression thoughtful. Do you think he'll really change? Marcus smiled faintly. Time will tell. But the important thing is that he's starting to see the problem. That's the first step. Jordan nodded, a sense of pride swelling in his chest. He saw his father in a new light, not just as a police captain, but as someone who stood for something bigger than himself. Weeks later, Jordan overheard his father on a call with the precinct, discussing new training programs and community outreach initiatives. The officer's name came up, and Marcus mentioned his active involvement in the changes. As Jordan sat at the dinner table that evening, he couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope. The road ahead was long, but for the first time, he understood the power of standing firm in the face of injustice. It wasn't just about fighting for change. It was about inspiring it, one spark at a time. It's really important to remember that everyone deserves to be treated with respect and dignity, regardless of their race or background. If you ever encounter a situation where someone is being treated unfairly, it's crucial to stand up for what's right and support the person being targeted. Would you like to share your thoughts or experiences on this topic? Your insights could help others understand the importance of standing against racism and promoting equality. Let's create a space where we can learn from each other and make a positive impact.